Welcome to the Lassercast. I am Pete, one of your hosts, and I got my good friend over there, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel. Danny, it's
What
that
is
time
up?
of year again.
5 years. This is the fifth time that we are
That is,
doing.
I
Yeah,
think it's four.
2020. Well, because we started in 2020, so we did the best of 2020. Oh, 21, 22, 23, 24.
Okay,
I think
okay.
I think it's
If you can think
five.
of, okay. But wouldn't it be the movies of 2025 though? If it was five,
I don't know. It's like the difference between like the birthday and the anniversary, right? It's like your 25th birthday is not the 25th anniversary of your birth. That would be your
right?
26th birthday. So I'm not sure. We've been doing the show 5 years, so I think this would be our fifth uh countdown of our top 10. Either way, I'm glad to be here. I love this is one of our my favorite videos that we do every year
Hmm.
because we get to only talk about movies that we genuinely either really, really liked or loved,
Yeah,
instead of like worrying about, you know, pissing people off with negative opinions about
right.
horror movies or TV shows or something else.
Well, let me ask you this. Do we normally like greatly disagree with these lists? Like, are there ever points where like I have something on my list and you're like, what the hell, Pete? Or vice
No, I think the biggest disagreement came with it, I loved Terrifier 2 back in, I believe, I want to say 2023, and you obviously did not, and that was very high on my list. Uh, where for you it was not. But
right.
other than that, I think we've pretty much. I mean, there have been a few movies that I've like had as an honorable mention where if our list went to 12, I would have had
Yeah.
it in, and you had it at like seven. But
Right,
I
right.
don't. I don't think there's ever been a case where I'm like my number one movie, and you were like number one. That movie sucked.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
there's never been that level of disagreement, and I think we've actually had movies very close to the top. I
Hmm.
remember a movie that's not on my list for 2024 is a remake of a movie that we had very high on our list a couple
Oh,
years ago, which is Speak No Evil, the original Speak No Evil.
yeah.
Um, I actually finally watched the the American remake of that.
Yeah.
I was not the biggest fan, uh, and it's not on my list. But yes,
Okay.
I did love the original, and we both had that very close to the top.
Yes, sir. That was my number one. So all I was gonna say was that like uh that what I think is one of your honorable mentions might be like my number one. So I think we should go to your honorable mentions. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think I know what movie you're talking about, and I think it's in if it's the movie I'm thinking of, it's in my top 10, but
Okay.
it's not very high. And I think that might be the biggest point of difference between us this year.
Right.
Uh, I always do a list of honorable mentions. I'm not going to talk about them. Uh, I'll just mention their titles. Couple movies that are on Shudder. The Devil's Bath, which is a really, really depressing horror movie uh, about a woman who wants to die, and the only way she can have, suicide is illegal. So the only way she can be executed is to commit a horrible crime. It's just one of the most depressingly sick horror movies I've ever seen. Uh, just we watched a movie way back, I think in January of 2024, called Destroy All Neighbors that I really enjoyed. I saw it at uh, a Shutter screening at IFC Center. It was a ton of fun. Just outside of my top 10.
Oh,
Stop
so hold
motion.
up. That's one of mine now. Destroy All
Okay.
Neighbors is actually my number nine.
Okay. So not that far off. I mean, it's in my honorable mentions. It's number nine.
Yeah.
A couple more that are on Shutter. Good morning. Good morning. We didn't even get to the top 10 list, so we're
Yeah.
good. I'm running through the honorable mentions. Stop motion. Really love that movie. That was another one on Shutter right now. Uh, Eczema, Exhuma, which is I believe, South Korean horror film. Really crazy ghost story with some real violent action towards the end. Uh,
Yeah.
there is a movie called The Coffee Table, which
Uh,
I almost shut off in the middle because it has one of the plot of this movie, which I will not spoil for anybody, is one of the most jaw-dropping ideas. It's so simple and it's so terrifying as as a real thing that I almost had to turn the movie off. And because I had to almost turn the movie off, I was almost going to put it in the top 10 just because of how sick it made me feel, but I ended up just putting it outside. And I
oh wow.
agree, it was fucking wild. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then a couple really popular movies that might shock you to be outside of my top 10.
Do it.
A movie we both really liked probably is in your top 10, Oddity.
That is in my top 10.
Okay. I'll let you go into detail later, but
Yeah.
I really, really liked it. It got the statue man puppet thing is sick as hell. I love it. Late Night with the Devil. Really enjoyed that movie. That's
That's in my
probably
top
Pete's
10.
number. Okay, that by Pete's reaction, that's probably in his top like five. And then
Yep.
another one that Charlotte and I watched, and it was my second watch of it, and I really enjoyed it both times, but it just made it outside my top 10, is Lisa Frankenstein.
Oh.
And I feel like that's a movie that Pepper would enjoy, but that you
Hmm.
probably shouldn't show Clem for a few more years. Uh,
Okay. So we have a lot of comments so far from our life in horror. Welcome to the show. I think this is your first time commenting on stuff. We are very, very grateful to have you joining us today. Hello, Clarice. We're appreciating you say your opinion on the movies that Danny's dropping over here. Feel free to do that throughout the whole episode. We love when y'all comment on stuff.
I want to make I want to make one more honorable mention, and I want to make this very clear. This is in my top 10 of films in 2024, but in good. I'm always the guy who complains about people complaining about what genre the movie is. Like
Okay.
I can't like, oh, Jaws isn't a horror movie. Shut the fuck up. I couldn't put Caddo Lake on a list
Oh,
on the top 10 horror list because it's not. It's a drama. It becomes a science fiction movie. It's so fucking good. I think it was you recommended that
it
to our
was.
group chat, and I loved it. And there's a moment in that movie I will not spoil where my jaw dropped when I finally understood the twist of it, and
Yeah.
I loved it. And I thought, ooh, it's sci-fi. There's a few movies on my list that kind of walk the genre line, but Caddo Lake is not a horror movie. I couldn't put it on my list, but I wanted to mention it because it's definitely sci-fi. It's definitely a genre film. It's on Max. If you haven't seen that, go out and watch it. It's so freaking good. And thank you to Pete for recommending that.
Yes, yes. I was going to say that Caddo Lake thought it was considered horror too. It would be number one on my list because I love Caddo Lake. Uh, Furiosa just dropped on Netflix, recently, and I started rewatching it again, and I was like, damn, I really fucking love this movie too. But of course, that's not horror at all. But I kind of wanted to give some love to that movie because I think that it just kind of came and went, and I just loved it a lot. So we already
In
got
an
a list.
alt- in
Go ahead.
an alternate world, last week we did our what do you call it? We did our video for Oscar movies, hence my mug. Hello, Clarice. And in an alternate world, I wanted Chris Hemsworth to get a Best Supporting Actor nomination for Furiosa.
Yes, 1,000%. I was thinking that while we were watching it.
Well,
So I'm glad.
Our Life in Horror commented. So Mads is a movie that is on Shutter, and I have not gotten to see that yet because I have a very contentious relationship with Shudder right now because on my big, beautiful television in my bedroom, my Shudder app does not work. And I very rarely have a chance to watch TV in my living room where the Shudder app works. So I've fallen behind on a lot of Shudder stuff. I saw that you mentioned The Substance. Yeah, stay tuned. Uh, Red Rooms, stay tuned. Terrifier 3 is another. I did not include that as my honorable mention. That was my bad. It is on my honorable mentions. Don't worry, Pete. It's not in my top 10.
Oh man. Yeah, well, Our Life in Horror, we got some overlap with our list over here. We're gonna get to them in a second. I have noticed, like, because I didn't see Mads, I didn't see Lisa Frankenstein. There is quite a few horror movies this year that I did not see. I just kind of didn't see as many movies in general. But and there a lot of really great stuff. This is a good year. Kind of a lot of diversity, at least in like the type of horror movie that's on my list here today. I think we could with your honorable mentions. Is that cool? Did I cut out already?
Just for like a tiny bit, but you're back. Do you want to start with your top 10?
I do. And then this one, though, Danny, I think we might actually disagree with. And I think you might be like, why'd you put this on your list? But for my number 10, I actually put Beetlejuice.
Okay.
It looks like you have something to say about that, Danny.
I enjoyed. Charlotte and I went to the movie theater. I saw Beetlejuice. I enjoyed it. The movie ended, and I can honestly say I don't think I've thought about it 1 minute since I left the movie theater. I enjoyed every minute that I was in the theater. I was fine. I'm not like it ruined my childhood. I don't think after 30 plus years, I don't think it has the staying power of the original, obviously. I think it did a good enough job at what it was doing, but it didn't make my list. But hey, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I did enjoy it in the movie theater. I enjoyed it. And if Charlotte said I want to rewatch it right now, I'd probably say, yeah, okay, as soon as we're done recording, let's watch it. I don't care. And like maybe years from now, I'll watch both of them back to back for fun. But yeah, so why'd you like it more than I did?
Yeah, okay. So you guys, most of you know, and maybe if you don't, then check it out. But I'm on a channel called Comic Books Transformed, where I talk about comic book movies and streaming shows too. And I was gonna say that there's often this, thing that we review called the legacy sequel. It's basically where like there's a gigantic gap between the original movie and its sequel. You bring back the original cast, and it's all exciting. You introduce some new characters. That's what happens here. But I actually hate movies like that often. I really don't like legacy sequels. They often treat it like, these characters that you loved that had this happy ending like 20 plus years ago. Oh, yeah, they had miserable lives the past 20 years. And here comes this new person that you should care about more. I think like The Force Awakens is probably the best example of that. I think that Beetlejuice is sort of a antithesis to that, because I think that even though Lydia's life was kind of rough after the original movie, it just is more like complex and interesting. And that's kind of the focus of the movie versus, let's get back to the original movie and tell it again, which often happens with legacy sequels. I think this one's more like, look what happened to Lydia, and hey, she's actually interesting. You kind of are interested in like what happened to her life since the first movie. I think it's just kind of great to see Michael Keaton back. I don't know. I just thought it was like a lot of fun, and it was like a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. There's another movie that's on my list, which I'll get to, my number 9. But I love like horror comedies. I love weird horror comedies, and especially if there's like interesting world building and creature design and stuff, concepts. This movie has it. Oh, look what we got here. Our buddy right here. I loved Beetlejuice. Haha, Dolores was awesome.
Yeah, I wish there was more of Dolores in the movie. I felt that, I think that was part of my, yes, 100%. I agree with Our Life in Horror that it did feel like they tried to squeeze in too many plot lines. I actually really liked the ghost kid who's trying to like steal Jenna Ortega's soul. but then like that plot point ends with 40 minutes left in the movie, and I was like, oh, okay. And then it
Right.
suddenly becomes about Dolores, and then there's Justin Theroux, and then there's the I did giggle uncontrollably at the end with the whole musical wedding sequence.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that. Like I said, I actually really liked it in the movie theater. It's just that the movie ended. I think Charlotte and I might have done a review, and then that was it. Like I was like, okay, that's it. Beetlejuice is over, and I kind of put it towards the back of my mind.
Yeah.
So that was your number 10.
Yes. So we can put it in the back of our mind for now. And why don't we move on to your number 10?
So I'm really struggling even this morning. So my numbers 6 through 10 are so close together.
Okay.
Like I want to make it, my top 5 is set solid.
Okay.
Like, and then 6 through 10, if I rewatch my number 10 later today, it might jump to number 6. If I
Okay.
rewatch my number 6, it might jump to 10. So don't freak out when I say this is going to be a problem. Longlegs is my number 10.
Oh, yeah, no problem, Daddy.
Yep.
That is my number 1 on my list.
So okay. So for you, I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'll let you have it if it's your number 1. But like I said, when I did a letterbox of my top 10, and I actually had Longlegs at my number 6.
Okay.
And then Charlotte and I rewatched it, and I started to think, oh, I do remember that this bothered me in the movies, but here's what I'll say about Longlegs. Maybe more than any movie on my list, the moments in this movie that are scary are some of the scariest moments of the year. Like there are some genuinely scary moments in this. Osgood Perkins does an amazing job using the camera. He'll like focus on Micah Monroe, but he'll leave a lot of space in the background where like her door is open. And because of Mike Flanagan and The Haunting of Hill House, I'm now trained to just focus, forget about the character. I'm now staring at the black space. And I'm like sitting there like something's behind her, something's going to come out, and nothing. There's nothing there, but it's
Right.
just he does that so well throughout the movie. I do love Nicolas Cage. I really love Alicia Witt in the movie, but there's a lot of plot points in the movie that I don't really think hold up to a lot of scrutiny if you actually like think about it. Like it bothered me so much on the second viewing that like she goes to the house at the end knowing that her like boss is going to go into the kitchen and murder his wife, and she just sits there and doesn't do anything. And I there's probably a reason that I'm missing of why. Oh, that sucks. Yeah. Here's what I will say about Longlegs, and I said this when I first saw it. Longlegs for me was a victim of expectations. The too many people had already declared it the scariest movie of the year, the best horror movie in a generation, the best movie of its kind since Silence of the Lambs. And so when I saw it, I went, this is really, really good, but it's not any of these things that are being said about it. And I think that kind of stunted my ability to fully enjoy it. I enjoyed it more on my second viewing, but then I also started to have kind of those questions about it. So that's all I'll say. But like I said, and I want to make it clear, Longlegs could very easily be my number 6. If I had this ranked at number 6, you would be fine, right? You'd be like, oh, okay. So between literally sitting here, I was looking at my number 10 and my number 8 going, do I switch them? Do I switch?
Yeah.
Nah, fuck it. I'll just go with my list. So Longlegs stays at my number 10.
Okay.
So
okay. All right.
we'll talk about it more later.
Yeah. Longlegs. Yeah. And so then I just want to point out, because the people that are listening as a podcast, they might not see the comments from like Our Life in Horror. So he wrote, Longlegs didn't make my list, but I had a bad theater experience. Power cut out, distractions. So I got to rewatch it. Yeah, we'll talk about long legs and stuff when we get to my number one. But for now, we can move on to my number 9 then. And we already mentioned this one. It's in your honorable mentions. Destroy All Neighbors. So I just want to say real quick, probably the main reason why I love this movie is because I have a soft spot for horror comedy. We've covered horror comedy on this channel a lot. We've talked about Scare Package, and we've talked about, of course, Psycho Goreman. I think, Danny, didn't Psycho Goreman, wasn't that like my number one year that we did this?
Yeah, I think it was my number 1 or 2, and you had it at number 1.
Right. Yeah. So like obviously, and we don't cover that much because it's not as common as like a typical horror movie. But I just love how fun this is and weird. Obviously, there's like some great practical effects, and they're just really creative with what they do with each different individual like neighbor that's dead but still hanging out with character. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's from Mystery Science Theater 3000. Do you remember his name?
He's also, but he's a talking head on Horror's Greatest, Jonah Ray Rodriguez, I think.
Thank you. Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed Destroy All Neighbors. Like, if I was doing the top 15, it's probably right there. I just thought I don't know if we've even mentioned this. I think 2024 was a really strong year for horror. And you mentioned it, a lot of like weird horror movies that kind of like divide genres and this and that. But yeah, Destroy All Neighbors is one of my favorite horror comedies of the year. I have, I think, one horror comedy in my list. It's coming up, so you'll hear it when we get to it.
Okay, sweet. So I mean, like, we could keep Destroy All Neighbors brief. We can move on to your number 9 if you want. Is that the horror comedy?
No, my horror comedy is number 8. My number 9 is Heretic. And I would have put Heretic much higher if not for the final, I don't even want to say third, the final act of the movie.
There you go.
I thought this was a top 5, maybe top 3 horror movie of the year for about 75 to 80% of the movie. And then it kind of falls into a very stereotypical horror movie ending of like the villain who has not been a slasher suddenly becomes like almost a slasher villain. And I was so into this fucking movie for the first 3/4 of it. Hugh Grant got nominated for a fucking Golden Globe, as well as I think for other awards. He did not get an Oscar nomination, but he was so good in this. You like are really reminded of how great of an actor he is. And, he's really come out of his comfort zone the last few years doing all sorts of fun movies. This was directed by Scott Beck and Brian. I wrote his name really fast and I can't read my own name. Right? Brian Woods. Yeah. Okay. I think they're the guys who did A Quiet Place.
The screenplay for the first one. Yeah.
Screenplay. And their screenplay, I teach history in high school, and I've said I would use some of the monologues in this movie when I teach belief systems. His like Monopoly board description of like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is one of my favorite parts of any movie this year. Yeah. Had this movie ended 10 to 15 minutes earlier, it would be in my top 5. I didn't love the ending. It does not ruin it at all. I thought the 2 women in the movie were great. Sophie Thatcher is so good. She's probably going to be on our best of 2025 list because of a movie that's out in theaters now, Companion.
Correct.
Speaking of Sophie Thatcher, Yellow Jackets comes back next week. So
that too. Valentine's Day. Yes. No, Sophie Thatcher is like fantastic. She is like one of the horror it girls right now. She's from Yellow Jackets. The Yellow Jackets cast, I think, is like a good, petri dish of talent that they're just basically using, because you got Sophie Thatcher, then you also got Ella Purnell, who's in a bunch of things. She's kind of in more like genre stuff, like sci-fi stuff, like Fallout though too, and Arcane. But we're talking about Heretic, which is the number 6 on my list.
Okay, so that's good.
You and I are in exact agreement that, like, basically the movie kind of falls off at the end, where it's really great. My only thing I want to contribute to this is I really love the use of the Hollies. All I need is the air that I breathe, and then how there's a comparison to Creep, and I think that both songs are used in very like haunting kind of exciting moments in this movie, and so I still kind of think about it to this day, and that's really important when you're making a top 10 list of like what keeps coming back into my thoughts. Heretic keeps coming back into my thoughts. So that was your number 9?
Yeah.
Okay. And also Our Life in Horror, just want to give you a heads up. There's a lot of like me saying to Danny, okay, so that was my number 7. What number are you up to? There's a lot of that when we do these. So then we got our buddy right here. He's saying, I can't wait to see Companion. Just saw Hard Eyes last night and loved it. Sounds like Danny.
I have a short, like 60-second review of Hard Eyes up on the channel. I got to see a press screening of it last week. It is awesome. I loved it so much. I do think it becomes a little too screamy towards the end, but I was shocked at how much I enjoyed that movie, and I am probably going to go take Charlotte. If Charlotte's bored later today, I will probably take her to go see Hard Eyes.
Oh, nice. I wish someone could take me to go see it because I kind of want to see that. But my number 8, if we're going to jump back on this. So I don't think I have any foreign horror except for one movie on my list. Okay. And then I have movies, though, that are set in Italy. So that's kind of a spoiler right there, Danny, for my list. My number 8 is a movie that is very, very, very similar to another movie that's on my list this year. It's like, wow, like it's weird they both came out. It's sort of like a Volcano Dante's Peak kind of thing. But you probably guess what my number 8 is then, Danny. My number 8 is Immaculate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is number 6 for me. So okay, we're getting there. We're getting
pretty close. Pretty close. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, so Immaculate, Sydney Sweeney, right? Most recent thing I saw with Sydney Sweeney was Madam Web, which is not a good example of her acting abilities, right? I haven't seen much Sydney Sweeney at all. I think maybe the only thing I've seen is the first season of White Lotus with her in it. That might be it. And Madam Web. So you got one really great example, one really awful example. Then you have this movie, which I think is a really great example of her acting ability.
Yeah. I loved this movie. And you talk about, you talk about movies that shock you. Like, this movie is a classic example. This is kind of the opposite. Oh, yeah.
That's for Hard Eyes.
It was so fun. I love rom-coms, and my husband loved it too. Immaculate is not a rom-com. Hard Eyes is, though. What I will say is, I think if you just take what we said about Heretic and you flip it, Immaculate is a really, really good, really, really creepy horror movie. And then the ending is like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe they just went there. And it kind of elevates the movie to, and that's why I have it at number 6, because it just, my favorite thing about this and my number 7, which, hint, hint, you said it's very similar to another movie that came out this year, is that they are on Hulu. And because Hulu is owned by Disney, you can find Immaculate on Disney+.
Oh, my God.
That is my favorite little nugget about this. But yeah, Sydney Sweeney is fantastic. She's an actress that gets a lot of shit because she's beautiful. And going back to Euphoria, I think a lot of people kind of talk down about her acting because of her sex appeal. And she is so fucking good in this. She really lets her like acting talent out, and the movie is creepy. The movie is very unsettling, and then has probably a top 2 or 3 ending of 2024. Looking at my list, I'd probably say it's my 3rd favorite ending of the year.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, we can kind of talk about the ending when we talk about this subject matter, which like I think I'll save that for the other movie that's higher on my list and it's higher on your list. We know what we're talking about there, The First Omen.
Yes.
And I also want to give a little heads up to Our Life in Horror. We're enjoying you commenting and stuff like that. Danny and I usually often have technical difficulties on Saturday. If you see any of us cut out, just let us know. And then also, if we just stop randomly, just come back and check us out because
we'll
keep
be
going.
back in a few.
Yeah, exactly. But then okay, but just to keep this train rolling because we still have a ton of movies. We're up to your number 8 now, right, Danny?
Yes. So my number 8, and I'll make this quick. It's my horror comedy. It's Abigail. I really, really love this movie. I agree. Speaking about Sydney Sweeney, people get jealous and don't want to see a sexy, confident woman succeed. I agree, and I think that has a lot to do with my number 1 later on our list. But my number 8 is Abigail. This is directed by Radio Silence, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, and Tyler Gillette. They are the guys behind one of my favorite fucking movies ever, Ready or Not. They've also directed the last couple Scream movies. And Abigail is a heist movie that becomes a vampire movie. And it's got some of the most quotable lines. Charlotte and I watch this, and Charlotte will stop me at random moments in the house and just turn to me and go, "Dad, those are frickin' onions." And which is obviously a play on one of the lines in this movie. I like this so much better the second time I watched it with Charlotte. And I really enjoyed it the first time. Love Dan Stevens. Dan Stevens is like a freaking, you talk about guys who are lighting it up in genre films and productions. Everything from Legion, which was amazing, to he was in another horror movie this year that didn't make my list, Cuckoo, which I thought towed the line a little bit too much into weird territory, but was still interesting and worth watching. But yeah, Dan Stevens is awesome. The entire cast here is so much fun. It was Angus Cloud's last movie, like, sucks about him. But yeah, I really enjoyed Abigail. I was doing something unique with the vampire movie in 2024 says a lot. You know what's interesting? I just realized I just said the words vampire movie, and Nosferatu is not on my list.
Yeah.
And
I was going to mention Nosferatu. Nosferatu is not on my list either. I think that Nosferatu is a beautiful movie. I liked it a lot more my second time around in the theater. However, what I was going to say is that you talked about the hype for Longlegs, and like the hype kind of maybe hurt your appreciation of Longlegs. That's the way that Nosferatu, I felt like Nosferatu was like the most advertised movie out of everything we covered last year. And there was so much hype about Nosferatu.
I agree.
Yeah.
And in terms of it being a beautiful movie, it got Oscar nominations for like cinematography and a lot of the technical aspects and the production design and all those things. And those are incredibly well deserved.
I'm here.
Okay. Our Life in Horror said, I'm not a big Eggers fan. It's beautiful, but it's too slow for me. I loved The Witch. I loved The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse was fucking amazing. But yeah, I thought Nosferatu, when Willem Dafoe was not on the screen, I wasn't completely invested. But back to Abigail. That is streaming free on Prime. If you have not seen it, it's such a fun vampire movie with one of the best ensemble casts of the year.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So Our Life. Yeah.
The Guest is her favorite Dan Stevens movie. Really cool fucking movie.
Yes. And Our Life in Horror, since you're kind of like our third commentator today, I just want to throw in too that if you are kind of new to the channel, we have reviews of like Nosferatu together like this. Danny has a short Abigail review on our channel. I hadn't seen Abigail when Danny saw it. So, but could maybe be one of my honorable mentions. I love Abigail basically because of the main reason that we keep talking about, which is Dan Stevens. I think he's just great. I just love seeing him in anything. I think the little girl in Abigail is fantastic. My only problem with Abigail, the reason why it doesn't make my top 10 is because there's a lot of moments where it's like, oh yeah, we got to get to this one story beat that we're kind of expecting. And then it doesn't make sense for the characters to do it. Like at one point, like Giancarlo, what's his last name?
Esposito.
Yeah,
Esposito.
thank you. He's like, I'll turn you into a vampire, Dan Stevens, and then like, you're not gonna betray me 2 seconds later, right? And that's just like, come on. But no, it was great. I mean, it was amazing how many like actors that are in horror things and genre things are in this movie. What's that girl from Freaky? She's in all this stuff
Oh,
too.
Catherine Newton. Catherine Newton had an amazing year in horror. Lisa Frankenstein. Yeah, she's awesome. I love her.
Yeah. So then that was your number 8, right, Danny?
That was my number 8, and then I kind of gave away my number 7. My numbers 6 and 7 are the Volcano and Dante's Peak of horror in 2024. It's The First Omen and Immaculate. Where
Okay.
does The First Omen fall for you?
First Omen for me is number 4, Danny.
Ooh, we're getting close. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just say The First Omen. We did an entire series covering the Omen franchise. My biggest horror hot take has always been that I will take the Omen over The Exorcist, the original 1976 film. It's the first movie that ever terrified me to the point where I had to run out of a room. And I was shocked at how much I loved The First Omen. Arkasha Stevenson directed this, and really the movie falls on the lead actress, Nell Tiger Free, who does such a fucking good job. She channels her inner Isabella Johnny in Possession towards the end of this movie. It toes the line a little bit too close to the original. You were mentioning legacy sequels, and I was like, uh-oh, is this going to be like one of those legacy sequels? But then, obviously, it's a prequel, The First
Right.
Omen. It's a little too close to the original Omen at the beginning, and then it goes wild. And I was so floored by a lot of the stuff that I saw in this movie. So I
Yes.
have that as my number 7. Immaculate is my number 6. Volcano and Dante's Peak. Ants and A Bug's Life. What was the other one? Deep Impact and Armageddon.
There
Of
you go. There you go.
of
Exactly.
horror.
Exactly.
Yes.
There's quite a few things to unpack with what you just said, right? So one thing I noticed with movies this year is that there's a lot of movies where they feel one way for like maybe 85% of the movie, and then they like drastically change at the end, and it's like this over the top crazy ending. I saw you flexing your pecs over there because I think you know that I'm referencing the movie that's on your shirt, but that seemed to be a thing this year. Now, the other thing, and I've kind of noticed this too, I'm looking at my list, and it's like pretty much every horror movie on my list, a woman is the main character, right? Now, women are often the main characters in horror movies, but
Holy
you go
shit.
back in the day before the 80s and stuff in the 60s, you have a lot of male lead characters, and horror is just different in general, right? But
It's crazy. I'm sorry, but like you just said that, and I just looked at my list, and 9 of my 10 movies have a lead female performance. That's like I would say Heretic is the only one where Hugh Grant is technically like the lead, but it's a 3-person movie, and 2 of the 3 are women.
yep,
So you can kind of make an argument that they're all female-driven movies.
correct.
Crazy.
Because even though Hugh Grant has such a big part in that movie, he's not the protagonist of the movie. The
No,
girls are the
he's
protagonists, right?
of course.
So yeah, but that's the thing. Horror is this genre that has been like so successful in the past few years, where other genres have sort of people have lost interest in them, right? The superhero genre is probably the best example of that. But horror continues to be consistent. It keeps doing well, and I think that it's because like it's what they try to do with comic books. Like they need to appeal more to female readers, but they choose not to because they think about like old school comics. But that's where like so many women just love to read. My daughter's a voracious reader, and she's reading manga and comic books and novels. But the regular big companies don't make stuff that's catered to women as much. Horror, on the other hand, like all these movies are about women. And I think that horror is interesting in the sense that like so many dudes love horror and rave about horror movies. And in other settings, like if they were talking about Star Wars or some kind of genre movie, they'd be like, "Oh, why are they making the female character the main character?" It's not
Yeah.
the case in horror at all.
Yeah, I agree. Like that was the big criticism of the new trilogy was, oh, they uh, that they turned like Ray into a Peggy Sue or a
Mary Sue.
whatever they Mary Sue. Yeah, I I I've always loved like part of horror. Like I don't want to get into this. Um, I really didn't want to like bring this up, and I don't want to make it like a big thing, but like one of the things that has like become a thing on social media in the recent days has been a comment by Damien Leone, the
Oh,
director of the Terrifier movies. And what he said was not at all wrong, offensive, or anything. He basically just made like a declarative statement that he is not political and that the Terrifier franchise is not political. And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Like I think I said in the group chat, I read his comment and I went, "Oh, I kind of agree with that." But then at the exact same time I went, "Uh-oh." Like and and I think that part of the problem is that when you are the standard bearer of a horror movie franchise, you have to kind of take the history of horror into effect. And horror has always been probably the most political genre. Like,
right.
you know, going back to the black and white Universal Monster days, going back to, you know, 50 sci-fi horror, which was commenting on, you know, nuclear war and the use of atomic weapons, to, you know, think about like The Exorcist and The Omen and Rosemary's Baby and the comments about religion and all of these things. Like horror just happens to be, and like putting women to the forefront shouldn't be a political thing, but it kind of becomes that. Like you look at the ending of Immaculate, I remember seeing people on social media being like, that movie should be banned. uh you know, we should you know, boycott Immaculate because it's pro you know, uh you know, pro-abortion, or like, you know, like making all these wild accusations. uh and you know, we made these lists instinctive of like the movies that we liked. We didn't set out to make an agenda of, oh, we're two white guys whose origins are in New York and we're gonna make a stand for women in horror movies. No, it's just, this is our list of our favorite horror movies of the year, and it just so happens that they're female driven films.
Yes.
Oh, Our Life in Horror, Black Chris. Yeah, somebody. One of my favorite tweets recently was, "Tell me where Black Christmas is political," and I went, "Tell me you have not watched Black Christmas, because holy shit! Like, there's an entire abortion plot in the original Black Christmas."
Right.
Um,
And see, abortion
so
is a perfect segue. Like as we wrap up this talk on the First Omen and Immaculate, because it's expected that these types of movies would start coming out. They were made. I'm pretty sure they were made after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and these movies are
or
like,
at least they came out after. Yeah,
yeah, these movies are like direct commentary on women's rights and women's ability to choose whether they keep a pregnancy or not. I mean, that's the primary thing of both of these movies. You know,
yeah,
they're like, hey, can we give you the best example of an unwanted pregnancy? There you go. You know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Jesus is
You
involved
have the
sometimes. The devil.
Antichrist in you. Yeah.
Right, right, right. So, I think that those are important subjects right now. But Immaculate and the First Omen make my list just because they are some of the scariest movies on my lists. And
Mm-hmm.
then
Yeah.
also the female leads are fantastic in both cases. Danny, what's the actress who's in Mayfair Witches?
Oh God,
Alexandria.
Alexandria Daddario.
Right. Okay. Don't you think that the lead in the First Omen kind of reminds you of her, like the way she looks a little bit?
She definitely has a similar face.
Yeah.
Much better actress though.
Well, that's what I was gonna say though, Danny. Right? Is because like she goes through an experience in the First Omen that's kind of similar to what Alexandria Daddario goes through in Mayfair Witches. But Jesus, like this is so much more like I empathize with her. You know, I feel for her. You can feel her experience. I just think it's like really well done. But we should jump onto another
So
one of
wait,
our.
Immaculate is and First Omen. Where are their ranks on your list?
Yes. Okay. Okay. So Immaculate 8, First Omen 4. I really liked First Omen.
Did you do your 7 and 6 yet?
We're about to hit my 7 now. But here's the
Oh
thing,
boy.
Danny. My 7 is your number 1.
Well, we have to end this conversation. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
No, well, let's save my 7 for when you do your number 1. My 7 is The Substance. And I think, of course, we've just been talking about women in horror, right? Oh, he's gonna hit me or something. There you go. Women in horror. But let's talk about The Substance more in detail. My number 6 was Heretic. Why don't we do? We're up to your number 5 then, right?
Yeah, my number 5 is weirdly my favorite of a new horror sci-fi trilogy. It's A Quiet Place Day One.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Oh my god, it's streaming free on Prime. If you notice, my head turned like this at the beginning of the video. I was looking up every movie to see where it was streaming.
Good call.
A Quiet Place Day One. Lupita Nyong'o, another actress who is an Academy Award winner, who consistently is in the horror genre, the sci-fi genre. I fucking loved her in this movie so much. Joseph Quinn, who is like the it boy because of Stranger Things, and he's going to be in Fantastic Four, and he was in Gladiator 2. He is so good in this movie. And my favorite supporting character of the year is the cat in this movie. Charlotte and I sat there in the movie theater, and like the tensest that I felt in a horror movie this year was they better not kill this fucking cat, because I will walk the fuck out right now.
Oh my god!
And listen, I have 3 cats, so you put a cat in a horror movie, it's like it's like you putting a dog in a horror movie. This is the first movie that gave cats the screen presence that dogs usually get. And it's just a phenomenal movie. It takes the premise of A Quiet Place, it puts it into a big city, and it does some really cool original things. It has a really emotional kind of overarching plot with who Lupita Nyong'o is and what she's going through. And I just, this was another movie that I walked into and I was kind of like, all right, it's another, First Omen. It's another prequel. Like, did we really need this movie? And then I watched it and I went, the movie ended and I went, holy shit, I think that's going to be in my top 5. Like, I couldn't believe it. And credit to Michael Sarovsky, the director. And yeah, it's basically just Lupita and Joseph Quinn walking the streets with an adorable cat, avoiding the Quiet Place monsters. And I loved every minute of it. Basically, it's a great advertisement for just what would you do for a good slice of New York pizza.
Oh my god. Okay. That sounds like a spoiler. I haven't seen this movie and I regret it. It was on my list of like, oh shit, I got to see these before we make our top 10. I'm going to rectify that soon as it's like streaming on something you don't have to pay for it. I think you do have
I
to
think
pay
it's
for
on
it.
Prime. No, I think it's on Prime.
Prime for free? All right, fuck, I'll watch it next time. With that being said, let's hop on to my number 5. This is actually my only foreign horror film in the list. It's Oddity. I think Oddity was what? It got like an honorable mention for you?
Yeah, that was probably, in all seriousness, that was probably my number 11.
Yeah.
Our Life in Horror, thank you.
Yeah. It was really great having you on. Make sure you come back. Yeah. Anyway, Oddity, just really quick. Oddity is like a nice small movie. Small cast, one setting. for the most part. You know, not a lot happens. It's not the end of the world like by the end of the movie, and the acting is fantastic in it. Things are told in like little pieces where you get learn more and more about the situation, about the main character, about you know, there's basically two main characters. There's this blind woman and her brother-in-law, and her brother-in-law seems one way for the first like 20% of the movie, 30% of the movie. Then we learn about him and it changes your perspective on him. Uh there's some really, really creepy stuff in this movie. There's this great opening sequence, which is very tense
Oh
for
yeah.
this movie. Um, Great practical effects, great gore. I just really loved it. I would recommend it to anybody that's like looking for a good horror
It's
movie. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. It's one of the simplest
Right,
movies, and I
right.
think my only criticism about this, and this is kind of nitpicking to a point because I thought Oddity was incredibly predictable.
Right.
Like it does nothing that I was not literally expecting to happen. But with that said, it still creeps the shit out of you. Like
Right.
that mouth open wooden carved man is a legitimately awesome horror movie prop. You're sitting there the whole time. You're like, that thing's gonna fucking move. That thing's gonna get up. It's gonna walk. It's gonna chase somebody across the house. And then yeah, eventually it fucking does. And you're like, yeah, you know what? It's still creepy as fuck. It would probably be number 11 on my list.
Okay. All right. Well, we're knocking them off, and we only have a few left. I think there's some overlap between the two of us. My number five was Oddity. So now we're up to your number four.
So I don't know if this movie's on your list. And again, this is a year where I was shocked at how many of the movies that I was kind of indifferent to walking in, I ended up loving.
Okay.
Um, it's Smile 2.
Oh, okay. Okay. I didn't see it. Yeah.
Smile 2 is such an improvement on the first Smile. And I genuinely like Smile. I included Smile on my top 10 list, I think in 2023, but really it was because of Charlotte's reaction. That movie had the best modern jump scares that I had ever seen. And Charlotte was like 5 minutes into the movie, was like, okay, I want to go home. Okay, I want to go home. And was literally crying. And it's become like a running joke with Chris and like our group where it's like, I told them, I was like, yeah, Charlotte started crying like in the middle and said she wanted to leave. And they were like, oh, so what did you go see? And I was like, no, nothing. We sat there and I told her, like, just shut up and watch the movie. And I took like a before and after picture of Charlotte, like walking in really excited and then walking out like in tears. Uh, Smile 2 was better, but in every way.
Okay.
It's the first of two, spoiler alert, Kyle Gallner appearances on my list.
There you go.
But Naomi Scott, if there was another horror movie actor to get an Oscar nomination, it should have been her. She was Jasmine in the live action Aladdin movies. She does all the singing and all the performing of the pop star in this movie. I think they've actually released an album of like her pop music from this movie, and
Oh,
Charlotte
cool.
loves it.
Okay.
Uh, she is so fucking good. And the way they film the smile scenes, that every time you're in her apartment, it is one of the scariest and creepiest things I've ever seen. They have this one particular scene with a dance troupe, and the dance troupe is like following her, but in like whacked out positions, and it's all practical, and it's so good. Uh, it could be a little bit long. It's like 2 hours and 5 minutes, which feels a little long for a Smile movie, but it never gets boring. It's consistently scary, and I genuinely think it's one of the best horror films of the year. And credit to Parker Finn. Uh, I now really want to see him do something else. I'm like really interested to see what he can do in the genre outside of the Smile franchise.
Yeah. I really loved the original Smile, and I think it might have made my top 10. Maybe not, though. I know it made your top 10 list. Um, Smile 2 is not on my list, but it's just because I didn't see it. It looks fucking scary,
Mhm.
though, as hell. First movie's scary as hell. Um, so then for me, if the thing I can talk about is my number 3, because my number 4 was The First Omen, right? My number 3 is a movie that you've mentioned, but I think you said it was your honorable mentions, Late Night with the Devil.
Okay. Yeah, it's in
Right.
my
So
honorable
late night
mentions.
with
Yeah.
yeah. So late night with the devil. I said earlier in our episode that this year had a lot of movies where like it's kind of one way for like the first 85%, then the very end of the movie just kind of goes off the rails or it gets really crazy. That's the case with this movie. I would have to say that with the exception of The Substance, a lot of times when the movies go off the rails in the third act, that's the weakest point of the movie. However, with The Substance, it's a different case altogether. But we're talking about Late Night with the Devil, and I think that like when it goes off the rails at the very end, that's the weakest part of the movie too. Whereas the strength of this movie, what people talk about is it's David Dasmalkian as this host, and then it's the sort of the growing tension that's going on. But besides him being this great selling point for the movie, there's also just the way that it looks and feels legitimately like a talk show from the 70s. Like
Yeah.
you could put it on TV and just if you got out rid of the supernatural stuff, it'd be like, wow, this is like I could believe that this actually was on TV.
Yeah, 100%. And that's credit to him. He's excellent in this movie. And I thought most of the group that he has with him, I love the guy who plays the skeptic.
Yep.
I thought he was excellent in this movie.
Yep.
This movie for me was like I remember walking into the movie theater and I'm like, I want this to be a 10. I want this to be a 10. And I ended up walking out being like 7.58. And I like I don't know if that makes it a disappointment for me, but it just I thought that I thought there were things that the movie could have done or directions it could have gone in. Like it gives hints to like this backstory, but it doesn't fully explore it. They continually show a guy in the audience dressed in a skeleton costume, and I was convinced that like that was the devil and that was going to be this big reveal at the end, and it turns out that it's just a nothing. That it's just the camera chooses to focus on this one audience member. And again,
Yeah.
maybe that's me. Like the movie, like I built something up in my head, and when the movie didn't do it, I got upset. But
Right.
I I really enjoyed this movie. It just didn't make the top 10 for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a big thing for horror, though. I think maybe more than superhero movies is that the horror community, like when they love a movie, they fucking rave about it so much. And then if you've seen all their reviews and stuff before you go see the movie, then you think like, oh my God, this is going to be so scary. This is going to be such an experience. And then when you go through it, you're like, oh, this is good, but it's not this like fucking thing that they're touting. So I really liked it though. I just really love David Dasmalkian.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we're up to I guess your number 3, right? Which I think I know what your number 3 is going to be based on power of
Yeah.
deduction.
Yes. So
Is it? Go ahead.
my number 3 is a movie that we did a full 45, 50-minute review on earlier this year. Strange Darling.
Right. That's my number 2.
Okay, so we're right there. The
Yeah.
JT Molnar, this movie is just awesome. And this is one of those movies that, like I mentioned, Caddo Lake at the beginning, where is it a horror movie? Is it not? It's it involves a serial killer,
Right.
and the beauty of this movie is what it's not showing you and what it's not telling you. It's filmed very Pulp Fiction-esque, where it's out of order. It has chapter breakdowns. So it's kind of it reminded me of Tarantino, a little bit in the style of the filmmaking, but it's got two amazing lead performances from Kyle Gallner, who is just another one of horror and genres it guys. Everything he does is fucking awesome. He's in the original Smile. He's in Smile 2 for a little bit. And Willa Fitzgerald, who we raved about when we covered The Fall of the House of Usher. She plays young Madeline Usher.
Yeah.
I remember my tweet when I came home from seeing this movie was every year there is a horror performance a la Toni Collette in Hereditary that is so good that you get annoyed that it doesn't gain any traction with like Oscar voters. For me, that was Willa Fitzgerald this year. Like, I don't know why more people aren't raving about her performance in this movie. She's so good in every possible way. She's great as a victim. She's great as an antagonist. And this movie just keeps you constantly guessing. It consistently surprises you, and it's got an ending that I genuinely really liked. Like another one of those horror movie endings this year where the movie ends and you're like, whoa, okay. The movie kind of like fades to credits. It kind of goes to black and white and you're just like, whoa. Like it's one of those movies that when I saw it, I immediately went on like every social media app that I have and like screamed the praise. Maybe I'm one of those people. You know, you just said the horror community, we go and the movies we love, we scream about them and we build up expectations for other people. I think I might have been that person for Strange Darling.
You know, Danny, it's so funny that you say that because that happens a lot in our chat where like, you know, you'll come in and you'll say something. But I think the more common thing is there's movies that people rave about. And then you and Chris are kind of like, yeah, it was good. Or like, I don't get this thing that happened. Like a lot of times it's the opposite of the hype. And then like, most of the time when you're excited about something, we're kind of all on the same page, like where something kind of comes out of nowhere and we're like, oh man, like I think Caddo Lake is a great example of that, where like, you know, I brought that up and then you were into it, you know. This movie, I think the reason why I like it so much, it really helps for you to go in and not know anything. Like if you didn't even see the trailer and then you go see this movie, then it's a real experience because it just really plays with your expectations. See, one of the things about reviewing a show, and I think I might have even said this in our video where we covered it, when you're doing this thing that we do, you kind of know what's going to happen in certain movies. You're like, oh, I'm seeing this now. That means the main character is going to do this. That means this person's a bad guy. That means that this person's probably going to die later to like redeem themselves. You know, you that's your movie experience, that you've seen this stuff so much that you kind of know where it's going to go. This movie does not do that. It actually it purposely takes your expectations of horror tropes and does like the opposite. And it uses the sequence that something is done so that it can fuck with your head. And I love this movie.
Yeah.
You know, that was my number 2. So then on your list, we've covered everything except
for 2 and 1.
2 and okay. So
what
then
was your number 3?
Late Night with the Devil.
Oh, okay. So what's your number 2?
Yeah, you know what? Why don't we go through our 10 through 3? Because then we're down to 2 and 1 right now, right? So, and actually, we just covered my number 2. Here's my 10: Beetlejuice, Destroy All Neighbors. 8 is Immaculate. 7 is The Substance. 6 is Heretic. 5 is Oddity. 4, The First Omen. 3, Late Night with the Devil. 2, Strange Darling. So that's my list. You bring us up to speed.
So I'm 10 Longlegs, 9 Heretic, 8 Abigail, 7 The First Omen, 6 Immaculate, 5 A Quiet Place Day 1, 4 Smile 2, 3 Strange Darling, and then I'm up to my number 2, which is Red Rooms.
Okay. Gotcha.
Red Rooms and Strange Darling, I kept going like this. And what eventually won the day for me with Red Rooms being at number 2 was the sheer level of uncomfortableness I felt watching this movie in the movie
Oof.
theater.
Yeah.
There are things I think I might have I made the weird comparison that this movie is like uh the last time I felt this uncomfortable and this nervous, like genuinely nervous watching a movie was the ending of Uncut Gems.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
that movie, of course, not a horror movie, but like you get so invested in what the fuck you're watching that you can't like you think that like your money and your life is on the line with what the characters in the movie. Uh
Yeah.
I saw this at IFC, packed house. The writer director Pascal Plante was there. He did a Q&A after. This movie it defies genre expectations. There's my top 2 movies. The reason they're my top 2 is because I've seen so much in this genre that if you can get me to sit down in a movie theater and genuinely see something I've never seen before and shock me continuously, I just respect the movie so much more. And if you've not seen Red Rooms, it is now on Shutter. So go watch it on Shutter. Um, because I don't want to really spoil it. What I will say is the movie is about a serial killer who is on trial for murder. The red rooms in question are like dark web rooms where the serial killer is accused of like filming his murders in these red rooms and then selling those videos on the dark web. And the movie is about these women who show up to court to watch the trial of this serial killer or suspected serial killer. And then they leave the court, and it's about what goes on after the courtroom involving the buying and selling and trading of these red room videos online. And that's all I'll say. And if you've not seen it, go on Shutter. I have not felt this uncomfortable in a crowded movie theater in a very, very long time. There's a couple scenes in this movie where, like, the audience audibly went, "Oh, what?" Like, could it was uh, it was definitely an experience.
Yeah.
And I will say this: I don't think it's an experience I want to do again. I don't think this is a movie that I will. Strange Darling is a movie that I think you can rewatch and enjoy and get new things out of it because great performances and great filmmaking and the way it's filmed. Red Rooms is such an intense experience that I don't know if I ever want to go through it again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I debated putting it on my top 10 list and maybe even putting it high on my top 10 list too, because I actually really liked it, but there was something about it that kind of felt wrong for putting on a top 10
Oh,
list. Not the quality of the movie itself, but just the subject matter and how
yeah.
dark. There's times when you watch something and you just kind of feel dirty and wrong for sort of watching it or being into it. And this is one of those examples. But what's amazing about this movie, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, is that it doesn't show much at all. Everything is like based on you imagining what actually happened. And somehow that right.
sound design and like just the implication of things. Like you'll hear the video in the background. You'll see a character's reaction to it.
Right. Right.
It's
Do you remember
oh,
do you remember Grizzly Man? Do you remember that documentary? Did you see that?
yeah.
Werner Herzog? Do you remember there's one part where Werner Herzog is listening to the actual guy getting eaten by the bear, and you just see Werner Herzog's reaction, and then he says to the guy that had the recording, "Don't ever listen to this." That's what this fucking movie is, you know?
That's a great fucking comparison. Yeah, it really feels like the last 30 minutes of this movie I continuously went back and forth between, oh God, what am I watching? And, oh, what the fuck? And like, just like there were other people that I knew in the theater. And when the movie ended, we all just kind of looked at each other
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah. And then you had to like check into some kind of support group afterwards, you know?
yeah, really. No shit.
No, no, it's a great fucking movie. You know, it felt wrong, like the subject matter and just like what happens. So, and the lead actress does a fantastic fucking job.
Yeah, both of the lead actress and the supporting actress who like
Yeah,
you feel they do this amazing kind of like character swap midway through the movie when you really start to kind of feel like you know what's going on. And yeah, it's just like if you've seen Uncut Gems, you know what I'm talking about at the end of that movie, how like watching Sandler get the gambling on that game, and you're like sitting there. And I remember watching Uncut Gems and then like having to remind myself, it's not my money. What am I doing? Like, stop it. Don't get nervous.
yes,
I'm not going to lose any money here. I'm a human being in the audience.
right.
But
I
that's how I
love
felt.
Uncut Gems. Have you ever seen Good Time? By the way,
I haven't. That's Pattinson, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't, but I've heard so many good things about it.
Tonight, if you got nothing, man, that's all you.
Hey,
Um,
it's a Saturday night, so you know I have nothing going on.
nice, nice. I want to say one last thing about Red Rooms, and then we can move on to my number one, which you've already mentioned. But I was going to say that there's this one scene in this movie where she's in a bedroom of one of the victims, and she takes a picture, and that is probably one of the most chilling images in a horror movie this year. Is that scene?
How there's a scene where she walks into the courtroom and does something that is like groan inducing in the best possible way. I still can't believe, like, I'm picturing it now and going, I can't believe that was a scene in a fucking movie this year. Like
Yep.
it's just unbelievable. Like, and I'll tell you the thing that makes Red Rooms horror is that these rooms, these like dark web things exist,
Mm-hmm.
and that like there are probably like people in the world doing these things uh that we never thankfully see or know of. But the fact that this could theoretically be like something that happens is just makes it horror for me.
Dude, I have two young daughters. Believe me, I can
I
completely
know.
relate. So it's funny because usually there's like this kind of transition where like we're talking about something really dark, then we go to something fun or funny. But my number one, I wouldn't say is fun or funny. It's got funny moments, but my number one is Long Legs, and I get it. I get why you might have that kind of feeling of like there was so much hype about this and then it's not living up to the hype. Because I could say the same for myself. But I have to say, this is my first movie by Osgood Perkins. Every time I go to see a fucking horror movie in the theater, I see a trailer for the monkey. And I'm like, I
Mm.
want to see the fucking monkey. Um, but then I haven't seen Black Coat's Daughter, and that was on the fucking, horror's greatest. They were talking about that.
Good
People were
movie.
really raving about that. So I'm not going to go into this big long explanation about Long Legs, but what I will say is a couple episodes ago I talked about what my favorite kind of horror movies are. And my favorite kind of horror movies are movies that don't have a lot of dialogue, a lot of imagery where you don't necessarily know what's going on, but it's offsetting, it's off-putting. Like you might see something, it's not like a guy holding a knife, could just be something as like a woman dressed as a nun or like the underside of a person's face as they're talking and stuff. It's like not anything that's like a monster, but it's just like disturbing looking at it. That's or not disturbing. It just like gets your goosebumps going on your skin. That's what this movie is to me, and that's my favorite kind of horror. And I think the acting in this is fantastic. And one thing, Danny, just like Red Rooms, it's like when you have to use your imagination, when you have to fill in the gaps of what's happening, that's so much more effective than like just in your face disturbing stuff. And I just think this movie is creepy as hell, and I love it.
Yeah, no, I do not deny at all the creep factor of Longlegs. I think Micah is so good in this. She's another one. I feel like we've said, uh, you look at some of the movies on our list and you see some of these like young stalwarts of the genre, like Micah Monroe, Sophie Thatcher, Joseph Quinn, Kyle Gallner, Willa Fitzgerald. These are all actors who are young. They're younger than us by a lot, and they have been like continually in these genre production. Catherine Newton is another one.
Good example.
Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, right? You have all these great actors who make a living now basically in genre and horror movies. And it that used to be like, oh, I can't believe they got this person to do a horror movie. And now it's like you have these great actors, Lupita Nyong'o, Oscar winner, who consistently comes back to the genre. Micah Monroe is phenomenal. I love, Nicolas Cage does that thing that Nicolas Cage does. He shows up in a movie for a little bit and he steals every scene that he's in. And in this movie, he is, I think the hype for his character was justified in terms of like something you've never seen before. No character has ever looked the way that Longlegs looked. I have my little bugaboos with this movie, but I do totally get just on the feels and the vibes why this movie appears on so many, very near the top of most people's lists.
Yeah. I'm the weirdo that has it as its number one. Well, Daddy-O, right.
Well,
It's time. Yeah.
It's interesting because my number 10 was your number one. My number one is your number 7. So we both kind
Yes.
of,
Yeah.
and of course, I've not been hiding it. My number 1 is The Substance. Last night, Critics' Choice Awards, Demi Moore won another Best Actress trophy. Come on. Coralie Farja got Best Original Screenplay at the Critics' Choice. She's nominated for both Original Screenplay and Best Director. Last week, Pete and I did a great, hour-long talk about the 7 horror movies that have been nominated for Best Picture and horror's tricky relationship with the Academy Awards. And this year, The Substance has 5 nominations, including Best Picture. I don't remember the last time a movie ended and I just sat there with the biggest shit-eating grin on my face. I've had friends who have said to me that they think that the movie goes too far in the end. And I have looked at them and just, I said, I didn't think it went far enough. This movie, I remember the first time I saw it, for about the first 80 minutes. It's a long movie. It's about 2 hours and 15 minutes. For the first about 80 minutes, 90 minutes, I remember thinking, there's some fucked up shit in this movie, but it's not this like insane movie that people are talking about. And then a few minutes later, I went, oh, okay, well, it can't get crazier than this. And then a few minutes later, it got so much crazier. And then a few minutes after that, it went to another fucking level. And this is, again, not to like get sidetracked into, horror is politics, but like, this is a this is a horror movie that has a point to make. And sometimes, and I always criticize movies that I call sledgehammer movies because they beat you over the head with the message. This is a movie where the point of the movie is to beat you over the head with the message. Or instead of using a sledgehammer, it is to use a blood geyser to cover you in the blood and viscera of this movie. And I just admire every fucking thing about this movie. It's there's like videos you can watch on YouTube that show the scenes in classic horror films that Coralie Farja borrowed from, like The Shining, the bathroom scene. The bathroom looks like The Shining. The hallway and the rug are very Shining-esque.
Right.
There's so many like odes to other great horror films. I love that the movie doesn't spend 30 minutes on a side plot telling you every detail about what the substance is. It's a complete mystery. There's just a voice on the phone. There's like a lab in a back alley. You don't know anything about the substance when the movie is over. So it almost leaves room for like a substance, universe out there. And then it's got my favorite performance of the year from Demi Moore. Probably my second favorite performance of the year from Margaret Qualley. And, I think we mentioned it with Immaculate, like movies where at the end, you're just like, I cannot fucking believe what I just saw. Well, for me, it
Right.
was Immaculate, Red Rooms, and then this. The last 15 minutes of this movie is some of the absolute wildest shit you have ever seen. It is body horror. It is everything that you want from a movie like this. I can't say enough great things. My favorite experiences of the year were I went to see this 3 times in the theater. The first time, I had no idea what I was walking into, and I was just sitting there like, ugh, like mouth open, like people in the crowd audibly reacting the way you want them to audibly react in a movie. And then the second and third time I saw it, I got almost as much fun by kind of just turning a little bit to see the people next to me who were seeing it for the first time and just watching them react, watching like people crawl into balls to kind of avoid looking at some of the disgusting things that are in this movie. This movie uses food in the single most disgusting way I've ever seen food used in a movie. Like, if you need to go on a diet, this is a great movie to watch.
Right.
And yeah, to me, this was like the minute I saw this, I was like, that's it. Nothing's topping this. This is my number one horror movie. It's my number one film of 2024. It's nominated for Best Fucking Picture, and I hope we're back in about 3.5 weeks talking about Oscar winner The Substance, Oscar winner Demi Moore, Coralie Farja, etc. But yeah, so The Substance, as I've not been hiding this entire video, an hour and 22 minutes, is my
Yes.
number one film of 2024.
Yes. And it's a great way to kind of wrap up this whole discussion because there's been a couple of threads that we keep pulling at this discussion. We keep pulling at the idea that like these movies are all led by female characters, like that the female experience is such a big part of this genre and this genre this year. That's thread number one. Thread number two is movies that feel a certain way for most of the movie and then by the like last 15% of it just goes off the rails, goes bonkers. And then thread number three is like responding to horror movies that are super hyped up in the community. Like and often those movies are disappointments. This movie, there was a tremendous amount of hype about it. There was a tremendous amount of hype about the ending. And I have to say that the ending did meet that hype, you know? Uh-oh, you're freezing over there.
Yeah, no, am I here? I'm still here.
Am I here?
Yep, we're all good. All right.
Okay.
There was the first time I saw The Substance, I was like, after the blood geyser happens, and then Monstro Elasu is back outside. I almost said to myself, is it too much now? And then she falls, she explodes, and then her like the Demi Moore face crawling back onto the star is just the most perfect bow for, because I love the opening scene so much, the creation of the star on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood, and for
Yeah.
the movie to end that way was the perfect, like, just tying the bow on the gift at the end. And yeah, this movie couldn't go far enough for me, and I loved every minute of it. And I I I'm so glad that it's getting the recognition that I think it deserves.
Shit, yeah, man. Yeah. So what a fucking year, right? 2024. You say we've been doing this for 5 years, Danny, but I think this is our fourth time doing this. I think 2020 was Invisible Man for you. Last year, I can't remember what the fuck yours was last year for number one.
It was so long ago.
I mean, so much fucking shit happened a year ago in between. Yeah.
I
Did
know.
you remember your 2023
I
or four?
remember I remember
Three?
one of
Three?
my one of the years that we've been doing this, my
It was like
number one was a foreign film, The
Pearl.
Medium.
Right.
Pearl.
So there's
Wa-
so
Yeah,
Pearl and X was one of yours. The Invisible Man was one of yours. The Medium was one. What the fuck was last year's?
I would have to just Google 2023 horror real fast. I'm sure it's something very obvious that I'm just
Right.
blanking on. Yeah.
Right. But this, I think this was a really great year. I actually really enjoyed this conversation. I think that this is one of the better ones that we've had. Would you say the same or no?
Yeah, no, I think we had a lot of movies that were similar that just appear in different spots on the list. I think it's funny that both of our number ones were in the bottom half of the other person's list. But then we have movies like Strange Darling that were very close together. Um, and one of the things that I love about doing this channel with you and just having like our group chat with Brian and Chris and is that, like, we can recommend each other the movies to see. Like, we share, like, hey, well, like, we're going to do our list. What are a bunch of movies I need to watch? Um, like, I come back to Caddo Lake, movie I talked about at the beginning. I would have never looked at that on Max and said, oh, that's a movie I'm going to watch. But I watched it and I loved it. Um, I know that I went out and saw Red Rooms and, like, went out and made a big deal about how everybody should see that. So yeah, I had a great time. This was a good recording. This video is about as long as many of these movies now.
Danny, was your top number one for last year? Was it fucking Terrifier 2?
No, it was definitely not. Terrifier 2, I think, was my number two from last year.
Okay, I was just pulling up our channel for last year's and I saw Terrifier 2 on there. I was like, is that Danny's number one? You sure it's not your number one?
I remember definitely not putting it at number one. I do think I put it at number two though.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, why don't
Cool.
you tell everybody what else we got coming up on our channel?
Well, coming up next week, Yellow Jackets is back, and Pete and I are going to be watching and reviewing episodes of Yellow Jackets. Cannot wait. I kind of
Fuck
probably
yeah.
have to watch a YouTube video of to catch me back up to speed because I feel like it's been so long
Right.
since the end of the last season. But yeah, cannot wait for that. As far as what's on the channel now, we have our video on the Oscars and horror movies. I have short reviews of two films that are out in theaters right now: Heart Eyes and Companion. Yeah, I think we are done with our top 10 of 2024. And
Wow.
now it's back to horror movies in 2025.
Ah, perfectly said, my friend. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We always love the comments and, of course, when you subscribe. So, guys, stick around. We'll be back with Yellow Jackets next week.